Welcome to this explainer, the 24-hour mind reading experiment, and why we can't handle the truth. We're going to dive straight into the psychological realities of a fantasy pretty much all of us have had at some point, reading the minds of everyone around you. I mean, think about it right now. The person sitting closest to you is thinking something they will never ever say out loud, and you're never going to know what it is. Your entire life, every relationship, every single conversation you've ever had has essentially happened in total darkness, without you ever once knowing what is actually running through someone else's head. It's kind of wild to think about, right? But what if that completely changed? Not forever, just for 24 hours.
Okay, so what if you could read every mind around you for exactly 24 hours? Let's play this wild scenario out. You suddenly have access to every unspoken thought happening around you. At first, you'd probably feel like you just put on a superhero cape, right? You're expecting this incredible clarity, assuming you finally get to hear the absolute truth. It feels like the ultimate superpower. But as we're going to see in the research today, the reality of that day would be far stranger and, honestly, far darker than you can possibly imagine. Because, well, we like to think we want the truth. We crave absolute transparency, but our human brains, they were simply never designed to handle it.
The first minute, waking up to the noise. So as we kick off our chronological journey here, you wake up, and you instantly discover that hearing every layered mind simultaneously isn't a superpower at all. It's a fast track to sensory collapse. Before you even open your eyes that first morning, you hear it. And it's not a sound, it's thought. Every mind within range, layered on top of itself, a million whispers hitting you all at once. It's just an absolute flood of consciousness that you literally cannot turn away from. 4 to 7. That's a really important number here because foundational work by psychologist Daniel Kahneman proves human working memory can only hold between 4 and 7 distinct items at once. Like, just picture your brain trying to juggle 5 simple everyday things. Your work for the day, what you're going to eat for lunch, where you put your keys, an urgent email, maybe an ongoing conversation. That is your normal absolute maximum capacity. Now, imagine a literal tidal wave of thousands of unfiltered thoughts crashing into you simultaneously. There's no volume slider. There's no off switch. This creates a massive attentional bottleneck. So instead of gaining that superpower clarity you expected, receiving thousands of unfiltered thoughts causes your comprehension to completely and totally break down. This is the first strange truth of our 24-hour experiment. You don't gain clarity, you just gain unbearable noise. Researchers who study sensory overload have actually proven that a mind built to process one conversation at a time simply is not built to process an entire crowd's inner monologue at once. When your brain gets vastly more input than it can actively filter, it essentially just deflates under the sheer pressure of it all. So here's our timeline for the day. 8 a.m., sensory collapse. 12 p.m., intimacy destroyed. 3 p.m., bias revealed. 8 p.m., silence returns. We're mapping out exactly how the absolute transparency you wished for systematically dismantles your daily life. Okay, so we survived the morning collapse, but let's see how the rest of the day actually unfolds when the walls between minds are completely torn down. Focusing on the person you love. Let's say you adapt. You figure out how to put a spotlight on just one person, tuning out the rest of the chaotic world. Naturally, you focus on your partner. You assume that looking directly into their unfiltered mind is going to bring you closer together than ever before, right? You think this level of extreme honesty is going to be beautiful, like the absolute ultimate form of human connection. Well, you'd be wrong. Healthy relationships are not built on complete transparency. They are built on selective disclosure. This crucial point comes from relationship expert John Gottman's research. It reveals that removing the boundary of privacy doesn't create intimacy. It actually destroys the very foundation that trust depends on. Think of a relationship like the blueprint of a house. The foundation isn't having every single thing out in the open. The foundation is selective disclosure. It's the conscious, deliberate choice of handing a thought to someone as a gift, combined with the trust that they aren't constantly monitoring your inner world. The second you can read every unfiltered thought, you're not a partner anymore. You're an intruder. You've completely demolished the privacy fence that intimacy literally requires to exist. And to make matters way worse, neuroscientists like Adam Anderson show that our brains constantly generate these terrifying things called intrusive thoughts. Disturbing, embarrassing, or contradictory thoughts generated by healthy brains that mean nothing and are immediately dismissed by the thinker. Imagine opening up a brain and finding out it's full of spring-loaded junk, like the sudden bizarre urge to drop your phone in a sewer, or a shockingly mean comment that entirely contradicts how the person actually feels. In a normal, healthy brain, an internal editor immediately throws this stuff in the trash. It means absolutely nothing. But for you, you don't see the editor. You just see the trash, and you'd probably think it was their true self. So, what you actually hear is stripped of all context, lacking internal editing, unfiltered mental noise, and impossible to verify. You'd receive this massive barrage of contradictory information, and you'd end up judging the person you loved based on the very thoughts they deliberately chose to ignore. You'd essentially be watching the deleted scenes and the blooper reel of their mind, but you'd be treating it like the main feature film. You wouldn't know which thoughts actually mattered to them and which were just random neurological static. You'd be acting as judge and jury for the garbage their brain was actively trying to throw away. Stepping outside, the moral minefield. By mid-morning, you step outside into a world of strangers. And honestly, the world essentially becomes a battlefield. Every person walking past you on the street has a complex, sometimes spiky, heavily defensive internal world. According to psychologist Jonathan Haidt, our already harsh moral judgments would just go into absolute overdrive when exposed to everyone's messiest internal monologue. Haidt's work on moral cognition shows that we already judge people rapidly based on incredibly limited information. Now imagine rendering those severe judgments based on someone's most chaotic passing thought. The false consensus effect, the human tendency to assume that other people think more like us than they actually do. Because of this phenomenon, you'd completely lose your sense of safety in the world. Social psychologists show that discovering how genuinely strange and totally different other people's private thoughts actually are would be deeply destabilizing. We all walk around under this cozy little illusion that, deep down, most people think kind of like we do, right? It makes social life feel predictable, safe. Having that illusion shattered, seeing the bizarre, unpredictable reality of thousands of other minds, would not feel liberating at all. It would be entirely disorienting. You'd realize the world you thought you lived in was largely just an invention of your own mind. Reading the authorities, bosses, doctors, strangers. As the afternoon rolls around, you start tuning in to the authorities, the people making split-second decisions that directly affect your life. Maybe it's your boss evaluating your big project, a police officer on the corner, or a doctor glancing at your medical chart. Because of their roles, you naturally expect to find this rational, calculated, highly logical machinery operating inside their heads. But you'd quickly learn from behavioral economics that human life actually runs on incomplete, unexamined reasoning. Thanks to the brilliant work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, we know that these authorities are definitely not always operating on pure logic. You would literally hear their monumental decisions being swayed by hidden mental shortcuts, unconscious cognitive biases, unarticulated distractions, and totally irrelevant personal moods. Like, you'd hear them making a massive decision based on what they had for lunch or a passing frustration. You'd be left absolutely terrified realizing just how fragile the systems running our world actually are. The evening, the unseen burden. By evening, the frantic pace slows down a bit. You start reading the mind of someone who seems completely fine, only to discover a really heartbreaking reality. You're sitting across from a friend, a coworker, maybe just someone on the bus heading home. They're smiling, they're nodding, they are projecting absolute okayness to everyone around them. But mental health surveys consistently show this massive gap between outward presentation and actual internal emotional state. By reading their mind, you would suddenly carry the unconsented burden of other people's pain that they had deliberately chosen to keep private. And this is the heavy, quiet tragedy of this superpower. People have profound, completely valid reasons for keeping their struggles to themselves. By bypassing their consent, you force yourself to carry a weight you were never meant to hold, and you violate their autonomy in the most intimate way possible. The 24th hour, the noise finally stops. Then, as strangely as it all began, the clock runs out, the 24 hours end, the thoughts fade, and you are finally alone in your own head again. The blinding light of everyone else's consciousness just clicks off, and you are plunged right back into the quiet, beautifully familiar darkness of your own singular perspective. Mental restoration, the relief and necessity of unstructured alone time and solitude within one's own mind. Psychologist Timothy Wilson notes that a lot of us find our own minds unsettling enough during unstructured alone time, so the absolute absence of everyone else's thoughts, it would be an incredible relief. I mean, think about how hard it is just to sit alone in a quiet room with your own anxieties and your own internal monologue. Now imagine how incredibly restoring it would feel to only have to deal with yourself again after carrying the cognitive and emotional weight of literally everyone in your city. Privacy is not simply the absence of connection. It is the condition that makes real connection possible. The unknown space between you and the person sitting next to you right now, That is the exact thing making your relationship work. We so often view privacy as a barrier, as something keeping us apart from truly knowing someone. But the psychology shows us it is the very soil that trust, intimacy, and social stability actually grow in. It's the simple fact that we get to choose what to share that gives human connection its profound meaning throughout this entire explainer.
If privacy is the price of connection, whose mind are you glad you can't read? The next time you sit across from someone and wonder what they're truly thinking behind their eyes, maybe take a moment to be immensely grateful that you don't know. I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on as you look at the people around you today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it changes the way you appreciate the beautiful, absolutely necessary silence between us.